Denver Broncos rookie running back Audric Estime could be the running back too, and we'll tell you why we believe he is on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Broncos Country, what's up? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country for tuning in and making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get this show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more every single day all year long, including all throughout the entire offseason. Because for the true fan, there is never an offseason. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com. And look, today's episode, Locked on Broncos, brought to you by our friends over there, Monopoly Go. Feed your competitive side with Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Now, the NFL draft class here for the Denver Broncos. We're continuing our NFL profile series, looking at realistic expectations for players, how they factor into the rotation. But more importantly, we're going to kick off today's episode of the show by looking at fifth-round running back Audric Estime out of Notre Dame, a big bruiser of a tailback. We're going to look at his scouting profile. We'll dive deeper to a lot of the questions that you may have for him here, Broncos Country. So, Sayre, let's kick things off here. What is the background here on Estime? Because this is one of the players. Look, yesterday's episode, we did one on Chris Abrams Drain, how we feel like he might be the most underrated draft pick in this year's class. This is one outside of really Bo Nix where I'm like probably the most excited about seeing what he can do.
You can't underestimate this pick right here, right, Cody? I mean, hey, I don't know.
Play on words.
Hey, I'm just saying. I know I'm not the first, but I really like this pick. In all seriousness, I loved it when the Broncos made it. We were hoping that they maybe went after additional offensive weapons there on day 3. Of course, we got Troy Franklin in the 4th round, and then you get Audric Estime in the 5th round. And when you watch this guy play, the first thing that stands out, I mean, he's yoked, Cody. You look at this guy. I mean, he's jacked from top to bottom, 5'11", 221 pounds. And he's built just like almost like he's like a bodybuilder type of trainer. He's really cut. He's really thick. And that translates to the field in such a way that he's able to carry guys with him, yardage after contact, breaking tackles. He's got better burst and explosiveness than I think his 40 time would lead on. When you look at his RAS score, it's not going to blow you away by any means, but you see the fact that he had a 38-inch vertical jump, a 1.58 in the 10-yard split, 10-foot 5-inch broad jump. Those are numbers indicative of tremendous explosiveness, and he shows that on the field. When he plants his foot and gets upfield, man, he's got a second gear that I think really makes this an underrated draft choice, Cody. When you look at this running back class overall, it was not a revered class. I mean, we saw teams like even the Dallas Cowboys at the end of the 2nd round. They passed on Trey Benson, Blake Corum, all these guys. I mean, running backs were not necessarily flying off the board in this draft. So for Estime to potentially be a top 10 player at the position, it may not speak, volumes in this particular class, but I do think he's one of the top 10 backs in this crop coming out. And I think the Broncos got somebody that, yeah, the 4.71 at the combine, does that scare you a little bit? Sure. But I mean, the overall makeup and explosiveness and the on-field speed, I believe he was clocked at one point as near 21 miles per hour on a GPS. I'll have to look that up to validate, but I did hear about that. This guy's got all the goods that you look for at the position.
Well, I'm not necessarily worried about 40-yard dash speed. Obviously, straight line speed. You want to see that about a guy, but look, you just mentioned like how much he weighs, like how physical he is for a guy his size in terms of bulk. Like if you can clock up to 21 miles an hour, if you can get up to that type of speed, I'm not worried about it. But you did talk about explosiveness, right? The ability to see a hole, hit that hole there, and then you're going to have a big burst there. But then what you're packing with that big burst of explosiveness? Physicality. You're running into guys. You're running over guys. You're carrying dudes, which if you look at his tape at Notre Dame, He did a lot of that consistently over the course of the last 2 seasons. Now, I'll tell you this. Now, earlier this year, not even having him on my radar, I think we were watching a Notre Dame game, and there was a crunch time scenario in the fourth quarter. I forget who they were playing, but they had a chance to obviously go out there and, kind of close it out there. I think it was in the final 2 minutes. He broke off a huge run for a touchdown that obviously ended up securing the game for Notre Dame. And I thought to myself, like, man, this guy, like, good size. Like, I'm going to keep an eye on him in the future. Little did I know, like, I didn't say going into this draft process, I didn't have any idea he was going to be in the NFL draft this year. And so when Denver drafted him initially, I was like, wow, this is the guy that I watched in that one game there. But the thing that you're talking about here that stands out that I like about his game, that it maybe transitions well to what the Broncos need, Sayre, how many third and short, second and short situations did the Broncos find themselves in offensively last year, and they just simply couldn't pick it up? Like, 3rd and 2 seemed like you almost had to beg and pray that you were going to be able to get that. Even with Javonte, even with Samaje, even with Jaleel, we're like, all right, hey, 3rd and short, like, Denver should be able to pick this up. Nope, they tackle for a loss, or they get stopped 1 yard shy. I don't think that's going to be the case with Estime here at the NFL level. Now, granted, defenses are a lot bigger here in the NFL than what he played while playing at Notre Dame. I will say this, though, with his ability for short burst explosiveness, with his size and physicality, I think in those short yardage situations, I think you are going to see the Broncos pick up a lot more first downs this upcoming season if he is, in fact, the running back 2, or has that role there where Sean Payton said it could be first down, second down running back. We'll get into the third down back situation conversation later. That's one thing he told us after the NFL draft there. But Estime, in my opinion, a guy that the Broncos should be very, very excited about, a guy that Broncos Country should be very excited about. I mean, you talk about punching into the red zone. In the last 2 seasons at Notre Dame, 29 total rushing touchdowns, including he had 18 this past season for them. So, I mean, in my opinion, that's an area Denver struggled with. I mean, what was it? Week 2, they had their first rushing touchdown of the season. Yeah. Was it the Buffalo Bills game, or was it the Kansas City Chiefs game?
Yeah.
That won. That was their next rushing touchdown. Like, they went for a drought of not being able to run the football for a touchdown in the red zone. And that was disappointing in and of itself.
Yeah, only 8 total rushing touchdowns last season, which was 5th worst in the NFL. I mean, so you're talking about having bottom 5 in that category, and that factored in, I think, massively to the fact the Broncos ranked 19th overall in points scored last season, was just the inability to punch the ball in on the ground. They weren't able to finish as many drives as you would have hoped for. And so I think Audric Estime definitely helps with that. And Cody, I did verify he notched 20.9 miles per hour on the GPS in a game against North Carolina State, an 80-yard touchdown run that he had against the Wolfpack last year. So this guy, I mean, when you talk about long speed, you talk about 40-yard dash, you want a guy that at 221 pounds, imagine a 221-pound man running at you at 21 miles per hour. I mean, that's terrifying. And now that the NFL has outlawed the hip drop tackle, just imagine how much of an asset this guy can potentially be. I know the Broncos aren't the only team with a big bodied back, but I think it's going to be the most obvious on guys like this who are tough to take down, and players that are smaller, defensive backs, they're going to be forced to have to try to get this guy down any possible way. I think there's just so many things to like about this pick. I know as people are listening to the show, Cody, they're probably thinking like, man, these guys are hyping up every Broncos draft pick as the next great. No, I mean, when you draft a player, think about from the team's perspective. The team is sitting in that war room and in their front office thinking about the best that this player could possibly become in their program. I mean, that's what we do on this show. We think about what's the best that they can bring to the. We're not going to sit here and be like, oh no, he ran a 4.71 in the 40-yard dash. He's too slow. He didn't catch that many passes at Notre Dame. Think critically for a bit here about these picks, and man, the Broncos with Sean Payton and this potential with the offensive line being, I mean, third best in the NFL in run block win rate last year, might be something there for this 5th round pick out of Notre Dame.
Oh, you want the screaming, yelling, hateful analysis? There's other channels for that. Look, simply, that's not going to be us. We're going to look at everything from both sides of the coin. We're never going to declare a guy that, it right away. Like, obviously, there's going to have to be some playing. There's going to have to be some competition. But we are talking about what it could be here for Broncos Country. So that's the type of analysis you're going to get here. Locked On Broncos. But how does Estime factor into the team's running back rotation? We'll tell you that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Monopoly Go. And if you're competitive like me, Monopoly Go helps you scratch that competitive itch because not only can you play alongside your friends, you can also conduct heists on your friends' vaults and their properties. But it's just a fun game that's ever-changing and it never gets dull. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more that you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. For example, you can get unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums, which can give you big prizes. There's also cool new playing pieces that you can travel different boards with. They have hilarious emojis where you can taunt friends when you smash their buildings, or if you heist their vaults, if you want to get a leg up on them, you can do that with Monopoly Go. Plus, Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, and a ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure, or they have a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that can help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything that you win on Rent Friends or Rent Frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now for free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go.
Some of the running backs on the Denver Broncos roster may need to be afraid of the 221-pound monster that just got added in the NFL draft. Why should Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin maybe be looking over their shoulder a little bit as rookie minicamp begins this week? Cody and I are going to talk about that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. I want to say thank you to every single one of you out there that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Thanks so much for rocking with us wherever and however you get your podcasts, free and available on every platform, as well as you can watch the show for free on YouTube. And Cody, let's talk about the potential role for Estime in year one. How could he factor into this rotation? We've already talked about this on the show throughout the offseason, but for those that are tuning in after this pick, they may not realize that 3 of the Broncos' top 5 last year in total touches were running backs, which is kind of embarrassing, quite frankly. I mean, it's not exactly what you want, but unfortunately, it wasn't a matter of those guys being the most effective per touch. It was really a product of the way that Russell Wilson was operating the offense, the passing game. The running back position to me is much less clear than maybe last year's statistics would indicate.
Yeah, and look, I think so much of it is depending on like what was the quarterback situation for Denver. Look, we've already been in that discussion. It was a variety of ups and downs with Russell Wilson last season. The scheme at some points, there were a variety of ups and downs. Sean Payton acknowledged himself. There were a variety of things that he could have improved on as a play caller. Like you factor in so many different things into the equation. Javonte dealt with a little bit of an early injury. Remember the quad against the Chicago Bears, and then you saw Jaleel McLaughlin really explode onto the scene and get a lot of opportunities and help them in that stretch there. But, for Denver, I think it's about clearly establishing for them going forward, especially with the rookie quarterback. We anticipate Bo Nix is going to be the starter for day one, or that he should be. If you missed that episode of Locked On Broncos, make sure you go back and check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. But for a guy like Estime to factor into the running back rotation, I think we really have to look at this draft pick, think about the vision for it. And Sean, I think, said something really interesting in his post NFL draft press conference. He said, I had a bunch of friends and family say, we already have rushers. Why'd you add another one there? And he said, it's really about like just being forward thinking to, kind of analyze the state of your roster. Like Denver needed depth at the running back position. I mean, Sayre, I feel like when you look at body type, like Javonte was obviously the bigger back for Denver. Samaje, kind of a hybrid guy, a little undersized, but, big body that can be in there in pass protection situations, passing down situations. But you don't really have a bruiser, right? And Denver's obviously yards per carry situation last year across the board was not very good, really outside of Jaleel McLaughlin, though teams started to pick up on him right away. The best ally that you can have for a young quarterback, if we estimate that Bo Nix is going to be the day one starter, is a strong running attack on the offensive side of the ball, which will open things up for him in the passing game, and then a strong defense, which, look, that's going to be, there's questions about Denver's defense. I think right now we could probably be a little bit more certain that Denver's rushing attack will be significantly better this upcoming season than it was last year. That's the big hope there, and you have to hope that the defense plays better, right? Estime, in my opinion, if he can come in right away and contribute in, first down situations, that he can rumble off big runs, there's going to be a loaded competition inside the room, because really beyond 2024, Javonte Williams, contract status is up in the air. Samaje Perine's up in the air. Jaleel McLaughlin, heck, going into 2024 is kind of up in the air with another undrafted rookie free agent we talked about in Blake Watson out of Memphis. But then you add in Estime in the NFL draft, and you really have to ask yourself, okay, who is he going to unseat in this situation? In my opinion, Sayre, I think this is more of an inclination to say, like, hey, Samaje Perine, you might be on the bubble in training camp here. This is the move. This is the draft pick that I feel like puts Samaje more on the hot seat than any other Broncos player right now on the roster at the running back position.
It's important to remember that last year, Samaje didn't even touch 100 carries. I mean, we saw tremendous involvement in the passing game, but he didn't even reach 100 carries on the season. And as we saw him running pretty well when he was given opportunities, everybody's kind of wondering, like, why the heck is Samaje Perine not getting more carries? Why are we continually, spinning the wheels with Javonte out there, trying to let him kind of fail forward in a sense, and it wasn't working. And so, I mean, you're right. Samaje is definitely on the hot seat with this one, especially if Estime can prove that, man, I can be out there for third downs. I can be trusted in these situations. Or if the Broncos feel like they can trust Javonte more in those situations that they gave to Samaje, the biggest key is going to be the end of half, end of game situations where, remember, I know people like to give Russell Wilson a ton of credit for this, and he deserves it because of the way that he played clutch football in some of the Broncos' bigger wins last year. But what about Samaje Perine going out there and making a lot of those plays happen? I mean, the Broncos would probably have lost against, I'm just off the top of my head, I mean, the Vikings game, the Buffalo game, a couple of others that they would have lost if it weren't for him out there making plays, making tough catches, getting yardage after the catch. So the key to me, if you're going to unseat Samaje, is really going to be unseating him in that particular role, or somebody taking that role from him, saying, I can be better at end of first half and end of game situation, where Samaje was an absolute, beast, where he looked like the reincarnate of, 2006 Reggie Bush as a receiving back. I mean, he was just out there dominating people in those situations. And it was almost like, shoot, just start off the game by running that offense through Samaje Perine. But that's going to be the key to me, Cody, is with Estime and any of these other guys, can somebody prove to be more effective in that type of role?
Well, I think the bigger traits that we're going to look at, pass protection being one of them. I think when you look at Estime's size, that ideally moves the scale for you there. Like, it's a clear advantage for him, but how is he consistently in pass protection? I think you have to have guys that can, get a linebacker blitzing up the middle. You got to be able to get guys who are aware of the backside. I think for me, it's about Estime. Can he recognize where he's supposed to be in pass protection in certain situations? Because it's not always going to be a gap. Like, depending on the play call, it's really going to be like you look A to B, or you also look A to backside, right, when you're going in there initially. And so for me, it's based on the protection. How does that estimate up? I mean, not even trying to make a pun there. Like, how do the Broncos estimate that situation to unfold here during a training camp? Heck, even in the preseason. And so much of it as well, you look at the value that has kind of been diminished a little bit about the running back position. When we talk about financials, maybe outside of Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs this offseason, the financial impact of being able to give a guy a contract after his rookie deal is essentially very, very not probable in today's NFL when you look at it. So can a guy like Estime come in and produce right away, chip on his shoulder? I mean, certainly he's going to have that, but also you're going to have these guys too. Adding Estime to this room elevates, I think, the chip on the shoulder for Jaleel McLaughlin, for Javonte Williams, and for Samaje Perine, which tells me, ideally, at least on paper, this should be a very, very fun competition position room to watch here for the Broncos this offseason. Look, he can factor into the rotation early on. We think that he can be the running back 2 here for the Broncos behind Javonte Williams. There might even be a situation where Javonte takes a back seat to him. I mean, there's so much that has to happen in order for that to be the case here, but I don't think that's going to happen here because of how Sean feels for Javonte. But these guys are going to have to come out and they're going to have to compete and play in training camp. And look, Broncos country, one thing we're going to dive deep into, what are our realistic expectations for a guy like Audric Estime going into his rookie season? We'll dive deeper to that in today's episode. Locked On Broncos. Broncos Country, today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, at FanDuel, they are America's number one sportsbook. And right now is a great time to get in on the action because it's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL with the playoffs starting up, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Whether you're a Colorado sports fan, you got the Denver Nuggets in the second round of the playoffs. You're a Colorado Avalanche fan, you've got them in the second round of the playoffs. If you believe that they're going to win that series, you can bet on that inside of the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And right now, new customers, they get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you go on as a new customer here today, you place a $5 bet, whether that's on the money line, whether it's on the spread of a game, and your bet wins, you're automatically going to get $150 in bonus bets that you can use on money line, spreads, player props, and more. If you think the Nuggets are going to win their series against the Minnesota Timberwolves in 7 games, you believe it's going to go the distance there, and you think they're going to win, well, guess what? FanDuel is a place where you can put that on the line. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's number one sportsbook. Audric Estime has every trait possible to make himself a running back 2, potentially a running back 1 here for the Denver Broncos. Will that be in 2024, though, is another question. I want to say thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Broncos. You can get us for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure, if you haven't done so already, you're subscribed or you follow the show so you never miss out on the best objective coverage of all things orange and blue. You're never going to get the hot takes, the clickbait, the screaming, and the people yelling angry opinions at things. We're going to break things down from all sides of the coin, look at the possibilities or some of the realities that a team or position group could face here. You get that here only on Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much here. Sayre, kind of diving into the final portion of today's show, looking at our realistic expectations here for Audric Estime, running back out of Notre Dame, a guy who produced significantly over the past 2 seasons for the obviously for that program. Now coming into the NFL, where look, big body backs, they tend to be, I think, a little bit more favored now in today's game. I mean, you look at Derrick Henry, not to compare the two, but you look at Derrick Henry. He's hard to bring down with his size and his explosiveness, so to speak. Audric Estime has explosiveness to his game. He's a big guy, will be hard to bring down. The question we have to ask ourselves here, what type of role will he play right away as a rookie? I think you and I are both kind of in agreement here. I think running back 2 is the reality here potentially for Audric Estime early on here for the Broncos and for Sean Payton. I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, that's how I feel. Where do you kind of fall when it comes to maybe him being RB2 this year?
I think that's very much in the realm of realism at this point. I mean, we saw the Broncos really struggle last season, especially Javonte, at creating yardage after contact. And so anybody that comes in this program and is able to come and do that right away, that is going to it's going to be such a stark difference from what we saw last season, where the best running back on the most efficient running back on the team, let's just be honest about it, was Jaleel McLaughlin in terms of the playing, running game. I mean, he was able to get those explosive runs. He was able to rip off the big carries, the big chunks. And it's not just about the big chunks. We get that. But, man, Javonte struggled in short yardage situations. We talked and touched on already the red zone, getting in tight inside the 10, goal line, goal-to-go situations, even dating back to, remember that game that opened up Russell Wilson's Denver Broncos career in Seattle. I mean, that has not been a calling card for Javonte as a Denver Bronco. It just hasn't. And so what has been his calling card is yardage after contact. That's what made him so special as a rookie, dragging the entire Baltimore Ravens defense, getting scepters from Kyle Brandt and Good Morning Football. That guy was not there last year. And I know that he was coming back from injury, and we talked about the miraculous recovery, and we hope that he can get back to being that Javonte in 2024. And I sincerely mean that. I don't want Javonte to get replaced by Audric Estime, but I think you brought up a great point, Cody, that it's possible that he could be. I mean, if he's not better this year than he was what we saw last year where he's, like I said, failing forward a little bit, getting his feet back underneath him, coming back from a major knee surgery, coming back early from what we anticipated from a major knee surgery. We feel like, and I don't want to speak for you either, but I think we both feel like he can be better this year, certainly, than he was last year. With that being said, if he doesn't prove that he's better than he was last year. Audric Estime is going to come in and look like it's going to look like the Broncos. I mean, it's going to look like they didn't breathe last year. And this year they're taking in a deep breath and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is what we can actually do this. He's going to look so different than the team last year at the running back position. So that's where I feel like, man, it's a lot of times it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. But in this case, I think Estime and his skill set, his NFL ready body type, and the yardage after contact, it just lends itself to him playing a lot early on.
And I think the biggest hope is that he can fit what Sean Payton wants to do. Now, I think in Notre Dame, he experienced a variety of different schemes and blocking schemes that translate well in the NFL, wide zone, different gap schemes there, and he had success in it. I mean, I think his vision is good as a ball carrier. I think his ability to recognize where a hole may clog up. He's not the type of guy. Like, the one thing I think you always have to worry about with running backs, especially young guys, right? When you get to the NFL level, you can maybe get away with it a little bit more at the college game where you can run east-west, right? But NFL, like, you always want to run north-south. Like, the philosophy of the running back position, always north-south, never east-west. You see it happen sometimes at the college level. You see it happen in the preseason with some of these young guys that are transitioning to the NFL where they really try to get to the sideline quite a bit. Like, you got to get forward yardage. I don't think that's going to be an issue for Estime. And I really think, like Jaleel McLaughlin, who we had said starting at rookie minicamp was a guy who caught my eye last year. It's like, hey, this guy, like, very, very fast, very explosive. You go out and you see it in OTAs. You go out and you see it in training camp. And then you go out and you see him replicate that in the preseason. For Estime, if he can come in right away this week at rookie minicamp, and look, there's not going to be any contact allowed. It's going to be hard to imagine, but can he just look the part, on air? When you see him doing some of these drills, how does it look? Is his vision there? Because look, like I said, the defensive line can't engage with the offensive line. Can he hit the hole there when it opens up? And then when you put the pads on eventually, how does he look in that regard there? Is he shying away from contact? Is he embracing contact? Is he just a guy that's too hard to bring down? Like, these are questions that we have that we're not going to have answers for another couple of months here for Broncos country. But the only thing we can do right now is maybe placate and kind of create a vision in our head of what he can be. And I think maybe another thing here as well, I don't remember how much of special teams Samaje or Jaleel played last year, but you may need him to also stay in and play some special teams. Like, could he be a personal protector here when the Broncos have to punt? And hopefully they're not punting as much as they did here in 2024. But yeah, I think he's going to also can't just be a one-trick pony. He's going to have to contribute in the run game. He's going to have to contribute as a receiver. And he's going to have to showcase early on that, hey, he's going to have to contribute in special teams, which I'm very, very curious to see what type of role that will be for him.
Yeah, you look at the special teams snaps from last year. Remember, it was at the running back position, at least, it was Dwayne Washington who played the majority.
Yeah.
And he kind of got, people probably forgot that he was even on the team, but him and Michael Burton both played quite a bit of special teams. So you almost wonder, like, was that the replacement? Jaleel played 80 special team snaps. Cody, I'm looking for Samaje Perine even on this list. I don't see anything here from him. It must have been a minimal role, if anything, in terms of snap count. Okay, 94. I see 94. So he played a little bit more than Jaleel. I scrolled right past him there. But so when you talk about special teams role, it was really the other guys. It was Burton and Washington that played primary special teams roles. And you expect Burton to be back, but he's another factor that we haven't even really talked about in this particular episode here in terms of, do the Broncos keep 3? Do they keep 4? As we're talking about realistic expectations, is it even realistic to expect the Broncos to keep 4 guys on this roster? If all 4 of these guys are going to contribute somehow, then I would think Estime would need to play special teams, or Samaje or Jaleel. Somebody's going to need to play special teams and take Dwayne Washington's role from last year. So that to me is another interesting wrinkle, but you're right. Special teams will factor in, and it's not just going to be about, oh, well, he's out there breaking a bunch of tackles. You got to figure out the whole of this roster in all 3 phases.
Broncos country, we want to hear from you. What are your realistic expectations for Audric Estime as he approaches wearing a Denver Broncos uniform for the first time? We'll see him this week at rookie minicamp alongside all the other rookies that the Broncos do, in fact, have here. And look, one thing we are going to continue on here when we talk about our NFL draft profile series, we're going to get toward the back end here for Denver. We're going to take a look at a Utah wide receiver who's a little bit older. We're going to take a look at an offensive lineman for the Broncos who can play a swing interior role here for Denver. You can expect that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Broncos, but make sure you let us know what you think about Audric Estime and his fit with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode Locked On Broncos.